One of the things I find most interesting when two explorers get together is we sort of trade stories. This is Life's Tough, but explorers are tougher. I'm your host, Richard Wiese. I love the outdoors. I always have, and I always will. I've heard stories that would make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Explorers are the type of people who walk in space, go to the bottom of the ocean, and stand on the highest summits. Scratch the surface of any explorer, and you'll find they're all storytellers. This show is about their tales.
This episode is brought to you by the Podcast Services Division at Life's Tough Media. Having your own podcast allows you to creatively reach all types of audiences, from clients to prospects, to your most loyal membership base. And by utilizing studio affiliates located around the world, coupled with quality remote recording capabilities, Life's Tough Media makes having a corporate podcast easier than ever before. Contact us for a no-obligation consultation at info@lifestuff.com or visit lifestuff.com to learn more.
Greetings to you wherever you are in the world, and I hope you're well. Our guest today, Dr. Alex Moore, is a Harvard climatologist. He grew up in Italy and Greece, finished his education in America. And when it comes to climate, he's a bit of a Sherlock Holmes as he uses ice core samples from glaciers, historical records, nautical archaeology, volcanology, and the list goes on and on. At Harvard, he taught 10 different courses, and recently he was in the news for his theories on how conditions like cold and wet weather can affect pandemics and what that means for COVID-19. And if you look at his CV, and I do encourage people to look Alex Moore up, he has probably more titles than anyone I know. Welcome to Life's Tough, Alex Moore. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Richard. If only the paycheck was as big as numerous as the title. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
Well, let's go down the university list because it's like you must have T-shirts that say Harvard, University of Maine. You have Long Island University. What else do you have? What are your titles, Alex?
Well, so first of all, the easiest way to know that somebody didn't go to Harvard is if they actually wear a Harvard T-shirt. We don't wear the T-shirts. No bling for us. It's all about the research. It's all about the work. So I came to this country as an immigrant at 17, and I actually tried to finish high school, and that didn't work out in New York City because I ran out of money. So I moved to Chicago, small University of St. Francis took me in for a semester, and then I moved to Washington University in St. Louis, where I got a job and a scholarship. There I got my BA, and then I wrote a thesis that got me into Harvard right away for a PhD, fully funded at 22, I think.
Wow.
Did that as soon as I got to Harvard, figured out that the program I was in was not really the right one, so I created my own interdisciplinary program to tackle. Well, the question was, why don't we have universal healthcare in America? That was the real question. And then I chased that dog down 800 years to figure out why somebody would come up with this idea of public health and universal healthcare. And I found the first instance of it. And it happened during a climate crisis. It happens, and then a pandemic. So that's where I started. After the PhD, I started a postdoc with the Climate Change Institute at the University of Maine, which in my opinion is the best place in the world to study climate change, directed by Paul Majewski, a Paul Lowell Thomas fellow at the club, the Explorers Club. Really a fantastic group of scientists from all over the world that are affiliated with it. And then most recently, 2 years ago, I became affiliated. I teach at Long Island University in New York City as I'm an associate professor of environmental health, as well as the director of the Honors College there.
Alex, you mentioned in the beginning, if only titles or institutes were dollars. And so in sports, athletes are sort of measured by statistics. And if you're a finance business guy, you're measured in dollars and cents. So, how are researchers and academics sort of measured on that level? How do you measure effectiveness?
That's a good question. In several ways. It used to be a number of publications, and then became quality of publications, and then it became impact of publications. And now it's not only impact, but also, as in how many people cite you, but also how many people see your things, your work. And in for that, I think I've been trying to adapt as the standard changes, and the last standard is actually the one where my work and my team, we've succeeded the most. Our latest article from September, for example, on the impact of climate on the last great pandemic, the Spanish flu, is in the top 5% of all articles that have ever been tracked. So it's been seen by millions of people in multiple formats on CNN, Washington Post, Newsweek, Japan. I mean, you can just, there's a huge list. They actually track these things now through a thing called altimetrics. But there are other ways to track impact. How many people cite you? That's an H index, and the sheer number of publications. I don't have that many because, as you mentioned, the work is incredibly complex, and we work with the highest resolution climate record on the planet. We have one data point per year. That is, I can tell you what the climate was, the composition of the atmosphere was every day for the last 2,000 years, more or less, which is never, that was never possible before. And in addition, we have historical records, which you have to comb through papers and lost manuscripts and archaeological records to actually find. So each article is groundbreaking. Each article has taken an enormous amount of time to put together, as opposed to, oh, look, I see a pattern in this, and here's an article. We don't do that.
But it's kind of interesting because you mentioned CNN, which is obviously a popular media outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I'm discovering sort of in the world of exploration as I meet more people from different countries, and even you and I both know of a young poet named Amanda Gorman who did something called Earthrise, which was a spoken word poem that she did, I guess, a couple of years ago when she was just getting out of Harvard. And it hit people at a different level. Like there's the academic level, and then there's the level that makes people sit up and think. So because you are in a very academic environment and you're dealing with very smart people and numbers and graphs and charts, but ultimately, how do you communicate this to, maybe somebody, you're the electrician in your apartment, or a plumber, or just the general public?
You're totally right, and that was the reason why I switched out of. I was a pre-med student, and I didn't want to do one patient at a time. I wanted to do millions. I wanted to help millions, and then I wanted to help the ecosystem. So communication is the key, and that's where programs like this, or the Explorers Club and institutions like the Explorers Club really help, because we have to tell our story, and we have to tell our story in terms that everybody understands. If my papers, if my research is read by 100 people, I've failed. If my research doesn't make news, I've failed. That's my standard, by the way, not everybody else's. A lot of people just want to hide in the book stacks and the libraries. I welcome the criticism. I welcome the being at the cutting edge, and being first is usually a bad thing because you're going to get all the flack, but that's okay. That's exactly what we need to do. We have to have a conversation, and so the way I relate to people is I relate to the things that they care about, generally their health, their wealth, and their children, their families, the things that are every day for them. If you relate to their own problems and relate them to the climate, or relate it to a public health crisis, then you're connecting. And most importantly, I think I never insult people. There is no point in calling somebody stupid. It's never going to make them feel any better about your data. They're never going to
Want to
believe
call them
you.
stupid sometimes. You've heard climate deniers, and come on, Alex, you got to admit
There is this tendency, but I mean, the thing is, not everybody has had the benefit of an Ivy League education or even an education at all. And who am I? I come from a fishing village. What were the chances that I was going to come and do
well, let's
a
go back
PhD?
to that fishing village. So where were you born, Alex?
I was born in Brindisi, Italy. Actually, a fishing village in Brindisi, Italy, called very creatively Fishing Village in Italian. I don't know why they call it that, but that's where my house was. And I grew up by the Adriatic. Actually, learned how to sail near a castle just about a half a mile from my house. I started diving when I was 3, and then started basically going back and forth between Brindisi, which is the gateway to the east, and Corfu, Greece, which is right the first stop, where I taught sailing and bartended or did whatever I could in order to get away from rather depressed economy, I have to say. So that was who could have ever thought that I would have made it to the United States or to get an education. And so I'm fully aware that many people don't have that benefit, and it takes, now, given the theme of your podcast, it takes a lot of resiliency. It takes life is tough. It throws a lot of stuff at you, and resiliency and patience and just determination is what gets you through. And not everybody
Take
has
me
it.
a little further back. So what your mom and dad, what were they like?
I was raised by my grandparents mostly. My grandfather was a physician. My grandmother was a nurse that then became a housewife, and that ran everything. And she was amazing. My mother was a clerk, and my father did manage real estate for his father, and did but really was not really involved in business or really anything. So it was, very average life. They were divorced. That's why I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. They were very young when they had me. And the imprint came from them, particularly. My father was the person that took me underwater for the first time when I was 3. He strapped a tank on his back and put 2 regulators to it, one to his mouth and one to mine, and I was just floating there with a regulator in my mouth, literally attached to him for dear life, because if the regulator came up, I was done. But it just took me, about 10 feet underwater, and the world of exploration was open to me. And I thought, why isn't everybody doing this? This is
I
amazing.
could say that. I think that everybody, when you talk to, you and I have a lot of common friends, explorers, and often they will relate to a seminal moment when they were young, and it may have been inconsequential at the time, but when you look back later and you think, what a fantastic world I was introduced to at age 3 underwater. I mean, that's pretty cool, Alex.
Yeah, I just uh, I guess the thing that really that changed in me, besides the fact that I really love being underwater or being in nature and understand that butterfly effect. If I change this, that animal is going to change its behavior, et cetera, and then it will change me. Uh, the one thing that I really appreciated, I think, was just doing something that other people weren't doing and not questioning it, not feeling like I was an outlier, or being comfortable with being an outlier, being comfortable with taking a path that, not even the less trod path, but the path that doesn't exist at all. and just creating it for yourself, and just thinking outside the box. And that's, how you get on a plane at 17 with your hands shaking with a ticket in your hand. Like,
Well, how does that happen? I mean, most guys, like when I was 17, I was raised like a veal. I had a mother and father and, very safe environment. No, I'm only kidding on that. But um, at 17, how did you move to the United States and where did you move into with who? And how did that decision come about?
So it's a silly story. It's like an unbelievable story. I was driving one night, my motorcycle, small scooter, nothing enormous, to my grandparents' house, and um, there are no traffic stops really in Italy because people just, as you know, you have your own Italian blood. People just goes right through them. Oh, nobody's coming, and they just. And I was coming, and they didn't notice me, and they just that drunk driver hit me fairly high speed. And I got a refund from that. What is it called? A settlement from that, which was about $1,400 in money from the time. And I bought a ticket to the U.S. The first thing I did was I bought a ticket to New York City. That's what I couldn't. I never
I know,
saw
but you
someone.
do have parents and grandparents. Aren't they saying, Alex, I mean, I could not have done that. Let's put it this way. Not only would I have not done that at 17, I would have gotten my parents' permission to do that. So
Right. The
how
parents
did that
weren't
happen?
really the problem. The grandparents might have been. And the problem was, I don't know if you remember Y2K in 1999. And I just told my grandma, look, Y2K is going to come. We're all going to die. Can I please die in New York City? I haven't seen it once. And I think she took the joke, and she just said, okay, whatever, go do. I had traveled already a lot. I traveled all throughout Europe. And so, taking a leap across the Atlantic wasn't as crazy. I moved here and I started staying on 63rd Street. I point south because I'm on Central Park West right now, 63rd Street and Broadway at the YMCA. And I stayed there for quite a while, trying to make as much money as I could.
Doing what?
And uh, uh, working at Starbucks in Lincoln Center.
And so you're not, do you have a high school equivalent of a diploma yet?
Nope.
And so what's the
Nope.
game plan? You're sort of to some degree and are you even a legal immigrant at that
No,
point?
no, so I had a work study system that the International Baccalaureate program allowed. And then, so I actually got into an International Baccalaureate program by just corresponding with somebody in New York City. But that didn't last very long. As I said, I ran out of money really fast. It's New
New
York
York
City.
City's expensive.
So a friend of mine told me in Chicago, why don't you come here instead of going back? And I went to Chicago and visited various colleges and realized I didn't have to finish high school. I could take a GED. So I took a GED with various colorful characters. I'm not going to say what they did. And passed that, TOEFL, SAT, ACT, all in about a couple of months, and I got into college.
Which
So
college did you get into?
it was called University of San Francis in Joliet, Illinois.
Okay.
And it was really cool college that maybe had 3 or 4 halls, library, and they were very, very kind to take a chance on me. And I had to get up at 4 a.m. to get on a bus to get there at 6
God,
in the freezing cold.
I'm exhausted hearing about you just getting from high school to college. Now, Alex, you had to innately be a smart person because most kids at 17 going into 18 would be so far adrift. The overcome economically, New York City, and then the emotional level of really not having any family around you. I mean, those had to be super challenging times.
Yeah, that was definitely something I'd never expected. Having missing people. I'd gone to military school for 3 or 4 months when I was in Italy. I got into this military college called up in Venice, and I didn't like it. And I remember missing my grandmother particularly. I remember actually, I'm not ashamed to say I was crying on the phone, just listening to her. And I kept. Unfortunately, my grandmother died right after I moved here, and or right before and right after, right before I came here twice, and in between she died. So that was not a I was not missing her anymore, or I was, but couldn't do anything about it. But I'm very grateful to the friend who then became a partner in Chicago, who, she was just wonderful. And we stayed together for 5 years, and then and we moved together to St. Louis, to Washington University, where I got finally got my degree. So
And
that
how
was
does
a real, big university.
and
I'd
how does
never
that
been there.
jump now? Harvard, you can sort of be cavalier about it now, but how does one then get into a PhD program at Harvard?
Right. So I wanted to be a doctor because my grandfather was a doctor, and I love helping people. I love just, I don't know, it's that giving thing. I guess I was raised that way. Very Catholic, very, you got to do good works, help people. And when I got here, the other culture shock was there is no healthcare. And what are you going to do? I was one of the people that didn't have healthcare for a while. And um, when I just realized in college, I can't be a doctor. I can't work in the system. I have to figure out what's wrong with it. And so I wrote a thesis trying to get at that. It was an interdisciplinary thesis in both public health, economics, law, and a bit of climate science, but not much. And that thesis won me admission to Harvard. So most PhDs at that level are fully funded. So it's just a question of applying. And if they accept you, then you've got a full ride for 6 years to go to Harvard, and you get paid a stipend, and you teach after your second year. So that's what happened. I actually applied. I was very arrogant. I applied only to 3 programs. Harvard was one of them, and I got only into Harvard. So that was. I remember it was the second happiest day of my life. I think the first really happy day was when I got my green card, and my life here was set. And then I got the purple or crimson package in the mail, or it used to come in the mail, big package, and really, I think I jumped.
This is like the American success story. This is, when I think about, as we've discussed before, my mother's family is from Corleone, Sicily.
Yes.
Which means you should be respecting me a little more, Alex.
Yes, of course.
But
I haven't received an offer I can't refuse yet.
Yeah. But when people think of especially Ivy League institutes, they always talk about the ivory towers, right? And so there's kind of 2 ways it can go for you, and I think the way it has gone from you, just knowing what I know, is because your journey, nothing was certain. You have to have a tremendous amount of empathy for other people, because you've lived that life of loneliness, of uncertainty, of the existential question is, where is my life going? You've gone through things by the time you were 21 that I think people my age go through now. So, how did that has to have formed you in a way that's different, but maybe wonderfully different.
Yeah, definitely. Empathy is it's probably one of the emotions or character traits that define me the most. Not to brag. I try to feel what other people are feeling at the same time, and or it just comes naturally. And there is also a flaw to that, which is that there is you think you're feeling what they're feeling, but everybody's got a different story, and everybody's got different experiences. So it's a lot of it is it's sort of a fiction in your head. You're close to it, but you don't really know especially if it's a woman or as a person that has a completely different experience from yours. There are all sorts of experiences I could never have, and yet that form that person. And yet I think I'm empathizing with them. But I certainly, that comes naturally. But I think that that's also one of the best qualities, or one of the best attempts we can have in our lives, because if you try and feel like I'll have the emotional intelligence to understand how other people are feeling at the same time, especially in a team or in a classroom, for example, which is or in an audience, you can really respond to that much better. You can make people feel valued more, and I guess exercise a type of leadership that people call soft power, rather than, I don't like that word, but essentially, having people work with you because they're loyal to you, not because they want to be you, or because they might want to be you, but I don't aspire to that. I just I'm uncomfortable when someone else is uncomfortable in the same room, and that comes from the fact that it's been a tough 21 years getting here. So
Alex, when you, and again, I can sort of relate to this when I was at Brown, is I met a lot of kids who really had a lot handed to them. I mean, they were born on third base, and they go through life thinking they've hit a triple. So when you meet someone who's now in that same PhD program, or maybe a professor, and you see that their path has just been sort of everything conspiring and the whole team behind them to make them that, do you feel sorry for them, or is this a little bit of resentment? Because the feel sorry is, I think that everyone imagines the triumph of overcoming a struggle, but if you
yeah.
really never did it, you don't have that feeling that you really did it yourself.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like vaccinations, just to bring it to today. There are two reactions when somebody gets, apparently there are two reactions. When my friends, or even my enemies, not that I have any, but when they get vaccinated, I'm happy. I'm just, oh, this person's being made safe. Great, awesome. I've heard even from my closest friends, they won't tell their parents if they're younger that they got vaccinated, because they don't want their parents to be jealous, or they don't want their parents to feel like, well, why you and not me? And that's just such an alien feeling to me. I just don't understand that. So if I see somebody, and many people, if you start a PhD, just this is PSA for everybody. If you start a PhD today, you better be independently wealthy, because there are no jobs out there. So I mean, there's so few jobs for academics. It's extremely competitive. So you better be independently wealthy, and you're earning $2,000 a month on a PhD. So it's essentially poverty. Not that I blame Harvard or anybody else. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much. But that's what you're looking at, right? And so no, I don't feel resentment. I think occasionally that those who have had those experiences sort of set for them with much easier way to get through them, are going to miss very some very crucial moments, some very crucial moments of empathy, where you don't understand the full extent of what's happening, of an event or a situation, because you're just flying at 30,000 feet. You're not down to on a Cessna bumping on the trees, and that's really it's a different experience, I suppose. But I don't blame anybody. I try not to have anger or jealousy or hold on to it
I
for
know, but come
myself.
on, it's a human emotion. Sometimes
I know, I get it. I
you
mean,
can't help but look at somebody and go, man, that dude's lucky.
yeah, I mean, sometimes, actually, going back to what you were saying about communications, sometimes I see research that is shoddy, or not really, somebody who's kind of misrepresenting their credentials. There are lots on Twitter these days. Just created a persona out of nothing, and they all of a sudden go viral with misinformation. That we've seen a lot of that, right? In the last 4 years, particularly, a lot of misinformation about very crucial things. That 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 pisses me off. That's we work so hard to represent the truth, and we don't make up stuff, and as a scientist or as a historian or economist, and then when somebody just comes in and that he's going to get found out, somebody's going to find out that they're a fraud eventually, and then my reputation, I have to live down that reputation, I have to live down that problem. Yeah, that's what really gets me, and that's why I'm so passionate about running a program of lectures and program with Passer and you at the Explorers Club, because we vet and select the best people and the best science, and amplify that for people that don't have the time to do that on their own. And that's I think the most important thing we can do as in a charity and nonprofit.
Yeah, Alex. So, one of the things I've enjoyed most about you is that you, when you come to, on a social level, sort of academic discussions, and I'm not talking about numbers and stuff, just any subject, that it's really fun to talk to someone who has an interesting, educated point of view that lays out an argument so well. Recently, and I remember where I was. I was actually, it might have been pretty close to when the pandemic just started. I was taking a train back from New York City to Connecticut, and I happened to see something pop up on a academic discussion on the worst year to be a human. And I think you were assigned, let's see, what year were you assigned?
Oh, 1348, I think.
Yeah, so 1348. So we had other people talking about different eras. And so when people think of 2020 and 21, pretty bad years. I know that my own great grandmother died in New York City of the Spanish flu, and my grandmother was 12, and she had to take care of four younger brothers and sisters. I could never really understand what she was talking about at the time because I had nothing to really compare it to. So take us back on some of those even worse years. Go back to the plague.
So the plague, 1348, was what we call the second pandemic. And the first pandemic was 542 until 700, actually. So that was 1400 years ago. The plague was, the second pandemic was 1346, if you start in the Black Sea, all the way to really 1700. It continued coming back. But it started in Italy because all the ports were in Italy. So Sicily was the first one to hit it, to get it in Europe, and then continued to Genoa and Venice, and then throughout Europe. And we actually have mapped this. You can see I have animations that we're about to publish where you can see the spread, and oddly the same. You're going to be the first ones to know the same spots that had the concentration of COVID victims during COVID were the same spots that we had during the Black Death. The major difference is that the Black Deaths, which was plague, as in a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, had a death rate of 40 to 60%. So today you might know somebody who got COVID. You might know a friend of a friend who died. You might have a friend who died, maybe an elderly relative. When you have 40 to 60% of the population die, you see that you think New York City is empty now. It's a flattening. It's an emptying of everything. Your neighbors aren't there anymore. You're the 40%. You're the remaining person. The economy absolutely flattened, it plummeted. In fact, it's the only 5 years, 48 to 52, 53. It's the only 5 years in human history where the air, we can actually measure the air being completely clean because nobody was doing anything. There was no mining, no commercial, no nothing. That's how we know that it was really terrible. And we actually discovered this. I published in 2017, and people said, it can't be possible. They must have continued doing something. It can't be possible that pollution stops when pandemics are around, and that's exactly what happened during COVID as well, although to a lesser extent. So the Black Death collapsed civilization in many ways, collapsed the economy, collapsed the healthcare system, such as it was, and it actually helped strengthen what was there in certain countries. That's why public health was really born just before and then after. And the Spanish flu, which was 100 years ago, also had rather high death rate. 50 million people died. 50 million. That's the population of Italy. That's the population of it's huge. And 500 million got infected. That's 1/3 of the world population. We're 50 million infected today and 5 million dead. So we are an order of magnitude lower. We're a lot. So 2020 has been really terrible, and this is not to diminish anybody's experience through COVID. I have many friends who were infected and some who died, and I'm not saying that I'm not sorry, and I very much feel for them. But it's not the worst year ever. Our economy is still here. We're still here, most of us, and we've just learned that we can do things differently. We can do this, what we're just doing. We can still keep in touch. Imagine, there's what's the word? It's just a sort of a short story that people tell about the Black Death that you can find etched in different languages all throughout Europe on churches and cemeteries. And it said, and one line says, and father would not go to son, and son would not go to father, because they didn't want to infect each other. So imagine that lasting 5 years, imagine that lasting 20 years, and not knowing whether you're going to be okay or not, right? Yeah, whether, okay, is it safe now? Is it safe now? And that insecurity continuing for decades, and it coming back in waves. The 1660s, 1630s, 1600s, still Black Death, still happening. We're so lucky that we can do this. We're so lucky that we can see all our friends on Monday nights and Thursday nights and every other event, and we're so lucky that we've just learned in a way that technology and medicine have advanced so fast. Imagine a vaccine in less than a year.
That's pretty incredible.
It's pretty incredible. And it's only thanks to CRISPR and new technology that's only come out in the last 20 years.
Take us now through, I know that we talked a little about butterfly effect, that things aren't singular events to themselves. And so you've been really kind of groundbreaking, or at least you and your colleagues, on pinning pandemics like COVID-19 to climate. How does that work?
So COVID-19, so far we know that climate can affect it, but we haven't said that nobody's figured out that it's connected to climate, and in a sense as its emergence is not connected to climate. It's connected to wildlife trade, which should be banned. And I say it in every interview. It's the first thing we can do to safeguard the world is to ban wildlife trade entirely. And that's most likely where it emerged, right, out of a wildlife trade market, and then spread. But in other pandemics, including this one, climate certainly has an effect. For example, the Spanish flu 100 years ago, which came right at the tail end of World War I, when the war was still going, it started with it's strange. It's like an eerie parallel in February of 1918. Just about a century and a year before ours. In February, it started happening, and the first wave was called benign because didn't kill as many people. And then it really popped up in the fall, second wave, September, October, just like the second wave we had last fall. And I discovered with my colleagues a climate anomaly that influenced Europe particularly, where this pandemic really caught fire. Climate anomaly right over Britain and northern France and Belgium and Germany, and you can see this blob on the articles and in the media, this blob of low pressure, which basically means a lot of rain and cold, and that continued just lingering there. It's not like weather that stays, it stays there for a couple of days and goes away. No, it stayed there for 6 years. It stayed there during the war, and I'll explain to you why it stayed there. But the effect of it was, first of all, to flood the trenches, flood the battlefields, flood the cities. And when there's flood like this, as you know from hurricanes today, when you have floods, water gets contaminated. That's why you get cholera epidemics every time you have a hurricane. Well, in this case, it affected also the migration, but the main vector and the main carrier of this disease, which is birds. Birds are very, very sensitive to climate and winds and the sun. And if they can't see where the sun is, and if they can't fly with the wind, they stay put. And that's exactly what happened. Turns out these birds, I know it's a long cycle, but we live in a complex world. These birds are reaching 60% infection rates in the fall. And they stayed put in the lakes that were giving water to the trenches, giving water to people, rivers, and they contaminated them with their waste. Their waste becomes, it's virally infected for 2 weeks once it's in the water, and that we know that this is an effect. There are many programs tracking flu through birds in the U.S. and the Delaware River, and so it's a pattern that we recognize in the modern world, but we don't understand why. I never understood why nobody had looked at this in the past. The reason why we had the climate anomaly, Paul Majewski and I believe that it was due to the fact that we were bombing Europe more than ever before with both planes and cannons. And this constant bombing was causing dust to go up in the air. And as dust goes up in the air, water molecules find the dust particles and they like them and they kind of hug and they create droplets, and that's rain. And so we kept it there with our fighting. In fact, the climate anomaly disappeared after the end of the war on the 11th of November, 1918. It actually disappeared shortly thereafter. So we live in a complex world, and preventing new pandemics and preventing the degradation of our world that we love so much, you and I, are nature lovers, and it really requires that complexity, understanding that complexity, and understanding that we live in an interdisciplinary world. We have to learn all of these disciplines to understand it.
Alex, I started this conversation in your introduction saying that you were like a Sherlock Holmes putting bits of information, but I'd like to thank you for taking that plane ride from that fishing village to do what you do. I think that that the world can only prosper through enlightened thought, and there is a historical precedent for enlightenment coming from Italy. And so I'd like
Yes.
to thank you for being on Life's Tough, but Explorers Are Tougher.
Thank you for having me.